3. Fluorescent lights of the Queen's Public Library hummed their endless monotone song. Nina Torres moved between the shelves with practiced silence, her tennis shoes barely making sound against the scuffed linoleum. 29 years old, and she felt twice that. Exhaustion lived in the hollows beneath her eyes, in the way her shoulders curved forward as if bracing against wind that never stopped blowing. Behind the circulation desk, Mia sat cross-legged on the floor, coloring with broken crayons. 5 years old, dark curls falling into her face, the kind of beautiful that broke your heart, because you knew the world would try to take it from her. Nina glanced back every 30 seconds. Habit now. Pathology, maybe. Mia never looked up, but Nina knew. If she stayed out of sight for more than a minute, the small body would go rigid. The crayon would stop moving. Panic would flood those brown eyes like water filling a sinking ship. It had been 8 months since Mia watched her mother die. 8 months since Nina's best friend, Sarah, who laughed too loud and loved too recklessly, and made the single worst choice of her life by staying with Troy Maldonado 1 month too long, bled out on a kitchen floor while her daughter hid in the coat closet, small hand pressed over her own mouth to keep from making sound. Troy was in Rikers now, awaiting trial that kept getting delayed, and he sent letters. The last one arrived 3 days ago, forwarded from the prosecutor's office with a yellow, sticky note. For your awareness. As if awareness could protect them. As if knowing he was counting down the days until his bail hearing would somehow prepare Nina for what came next. Tell Mia I'm coming home soon. Tell her daddy misses his little girl. Tell her I'm going to get what's mine. Nina had burned the letter in the bathroom sink at 2 a.m. while Mia slept. No, while Mia lay awake in Nina's bed, eyes open in the dark, breathing too carefully. Neither of them slept anymore. Not really. She shelved another book, The Interpretation of Dreams, Freud. Someone had left it in the self-help section, which would have made Nina smile on a different day, in a different life. That's when she noticed him, the man in the philosophy section. He'd been there yesterday, and the day before that. Always the same chair, the wingback near the window that overlooked the street. Always the same posture, legs crossed, one hand resting on the armrest, the other holding whatever book he'd pulled from the shelf. Today it was Camus, the stranger. He was older, 50 maybe. The kind of older that looked expensive, tailored black coat draped over the chair's back, charcoal suit underneath that fit too perfectly to be off the rack. Dark hair silvering at the temples. Strong jaw shadowed with stubble that was either careless or carefully maintained. Nina couldn't tell which. And he never turned the pages. Just sat there, reading the same book, watching the street through. Glass streaked with November rain. Nina felt her stomach tighten. Troy had people. He'd made that clear in the letters. I got friends, Nina. People who owe me. People who know where you work. She set down the Freud with hands that wanted to shake and forced herself to walk toward the philosophy section. Calm, professional. Just a librarian checking on a patron. Can I help you find something? Her voice came out steadier than she felt. The man looked up. His eyes were gray. Storm cloud gray, the kind of gray that held weather you couldn't predict. I'm just reading, he said. His voice was low, quiet, the kind of quiet that didn't need to be loud because it knew people would listen anyway. Nina gestured toward the book. Camus, heavy choice for a Tuesday afternoon. Something flickered across his face. Amusement, maybe. Or recognition of something in her tone that he hadn't expected from a public librarian in Queens. I prefer heavy, he said. Light things break too easily. He showed her the book then, holding it up slightly. The gesture of someone proving they weren't a threat. That they belonged here. That they had a reason to stay. Nina felt her shoulders drop an inch. Not relax. She hadn't relaxed in 8 months. But release some of the immediate tension that had been climbing her spine like cold fingers. "Well," she said. "Let me know if you need anything." She turned to walk away. "The little girl," he said. Nina froze. "Behind the desk. She's yours?" Nina turned back slowly, every instinct screaming, every muscle ready to run, to grab Mia, to... She looks like she's concentrating very hard on that drawing. The man's expression hadn't changed. No smile, no threat, just observation stated like fact. "She's my niece," Nina said. The lie came automatically now. Easier than explaining. Safer than the truth. The man nodded once. Didn't ask more. Returned his attention to the book that he still wasn't reading. Nina walked back to the circulation desk, on legs that felt like borrowed things. Mia looked up as she approached. "Who's that man?" "Just someone reading, baby. He's been here a lot." Children noticed everything, especially children who'd learned that noticing could mean the difference between safe and not safe. "I know," Nina said. "But he's okay. He's just reading his book." Mia studied her face the way she always did, looking for cracks in the calm, for signs that Nina was lying, that danger was close, that they needed to run. Nina smiled. Small, real as she could make it. Mia went back to coloring. The man came back the next day. And the day after that. Always the philosophy section. Always Camus. Or sometimes Sartre, once Kierkegaard. Always the same chair. Always watching the street with eyes that looked like they were waiting for something specific that hadn't arrived yet. Nina stopped being afraid of him on the 3rd day, when she watched him quietly move his chair 6 inches to the left so the afternoon sun wouldn't hit the face of an elderly woman dozing in the next row. Men who meant harm didn't do things like that. On the 7th day, Mia did something Nina had never seen her do. She left the circulation desk. Nina was processing returns, scanning barcodes, and she looked up to check, automatic now, muscle memory, and Mia wasn't there. Panic hit her bloodstream like ice water. She abandoned the cart, moved fast through the stacks, eyes scanning, heart pounding against ribs. Mia, where? She found her in the philosophy section, standing next to the man's chair, holding a picture book, where the wild things are. Nina's breath caught in her throat. The man had looked down. His expression was unreadable, surprise maybe, or something deeper that Nina couldn't name. "You can read?" Mia asked. Her voice was so small, thread thin. The voice of a child who'd learned that speaking too loud could make bad things happen. The man stared at her, then at the book, then at Nina, who stood, frozen 10 feet away, ready to run, to scream, to do whatever it took. "Yes," he said finally. "I can read. Will you read this?" Silence stretched between them like glass about to break. Then the man took the book. He opened it to the first page, and in a voice that was still quiet but somehow different now, careful, like he was handling something that might shatter, he read. The night Max wore his wolf suit and made mischief of one kind and another, Mia climbed into the chair next to him, not touching, not close, but there, listening. Nina's hands were shaking. She should stop this. She should grab Mia and explain later, apologize to the man if needed. But keep her daughter. No, not daughter, not legally, not yet. Keep Mia safe from strangers, from men they didn't know, from anyone who could. But Mia was listening. Actually listening. Not watching the door. Not scanning for exits. Not sitting rigid with that terrible awareness that no 5-year-old should have. Just listening to a story. The man read for 11 minutes. Nina counted, watched, barely breathed. When he finished, Mia slid off the chair without a word and walked back to the circulation desk, clutching the book to her chest. The man looked at Nina. She didn't know what to say. "Thank you," she managed finally. He nodded once, picked up his Camus, went back to not reading it. That night, Mia asked if the man would be there tomorrow. "I don't know, baby. I want him to read the next one." Nina stroked Mia's hair in the dark of their shared bedroom. Their apartment was small, 1 bedroom in Astoria, 4th floor walk-up, radiator that clanked like it was angry at the world. Mia's bed was technically in the living room, but she hadn't slept there since the night Sarah died. "Why do you want him to read to you?" Nina asked carefully. Mia was quiet for a long moment. "He's quiet like me," she said finally. "He doesn't make noise when he moves. He's respectful." Respectful. A word too big for a 5-year-old, except Mia had learned vocabulary too early because she'd needed to name the things happening around her. Safe. Not safe. Angry. Respectful. Dangerous. "Okay," Nina whispered. "If he's there tomorrow, you can ask him. But you stay where I can see you. Always." "Always," Mia echoed. They lay there in the dark, radiator clanking, sirens somewhere distant, the city breathing its endless rhythm outside their window. Nina closed her eyes and tried not to think about the bail, hearing scheduled for next month. About Troy's letters. About the fact that she had no legal right to Mia. Not really. Because Sarah had never made it official. Had never signed the papers they'd talked about over coffee 100 times. "You're her godmother, Nina. If anything ever happens to me, nothing's going to happen to you. But if it does, nothing will happen." Except it did. And now Nina was 29 years old, working a job that paid $38,000 a year, living in an apartment with locks that wouldn't stop anyone who really wanted in, raising a child who watched the door like she was expecting monsters. And a stranger was reading her stories in the philosophy section of a public library. Nina told herself it was fine. She told herself it was harmless. She told herself she'd know if he was dangerous. But lying there in the dark, listening to Mia's breathing finally even out into something close to sleep, Nina touched the phone in her pocket and wondered who she would call if she was wrong. His name was Elias Moreau, and he'd killed his first man at 17. Not that Nina knew this. Not yet. What she knew was that he returned the next day, and the day after that, and Mia brought him books each time. The Very Hungry Caterpillar, Corduroy, Goodnight Moon. And he read every single one without complaint, without comment, without ever asking why this small girl with haunted eyes had chosen him. What Nina didn't know was that Elias Moreau had learned to read in the back of his mother's flower shop in Astoria 34 years ago, before a rival crew decided his mother had seen too much, knew too much, mattered too little to keep alive. He was 16 when they shot her, 17 when he found the men responsible, 17 when he made his choice about what kind of man he'd become, in a world where mercy was a luxury and justice was something you took with your own hands. Now he was 50, boss of an organization that controlled 3 neighborhoods in Queens, respected, feared, wealthy enough that he could have retired to somewhere warm and clean and far away from the city that had taken his mother. But he'd stayed. And now, 34 years later, he was sitting in a public library reading picture books to a child who reminded him of every reason he'd ever picked up a gun. Nina watched him with librarian careful attention. She cataloged details. The way he never touched Mia, always keeping a careful distance. The way he closed each book gently, respectfully, before handing it back. The way his eyes would track Nina's position in the room. Not threatening, just aware. Making sure she knew he knew she was watching. It should have been creepy. Instead, it felt like consideration. Like he understood that trust was something you earned in increments, and he was willing to earn it slowly. On the 5th day of reading, Nina brought him coffee. Black, 2 sugars. She didn't know why she assumed he'd take sugar. He didn't look like someone who'd want sweetness in anything. But the assumption turned out correct. He looked at the cup, then at her. "Thank you," he said. "Mia talks about you," Nina said, surprising herself. "At home. She calls you the quiet man." Something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile. Something older and more complicated. "Children should have quiet," he said. "The world's loud enough as it is." Nina studied his face, the lines around his eyes, the way his jaw held tension, even when he seemed relaxed. The expensive watch on his wrist that probably cost more than her yearly salary. "What do you do?" she asked. "For work, I mean." "Investments," he said smoothly. "Property, development." It wasn't a lie, technically. He did own properties, multiple buildings across Queens, legitimate businesses that cleaned money like laundromats cleaned clothes. Nina nodded, didn't push, returned to her desk. But something in her chest had tightened. She'd grown up in Queens. She knew the difference between clean money and the other kind. Knew the way certain men held themselves. Knew the weight of expensive suits and careful words and eyes that tracked every exit in a room. She told herself it didn't matter. He was reading to Mia. That's all. Just reading. 15 minutes a day. Harmless. Safe. Safe. The word tasted like a lie even in her thoughts. The 8th day, everything changed. Nina was shelving returns in the history section when she heard footsteps. Wrong. Footsteps. Too heavy. Too purposeful. The kind of walk that said, "I'm not here for books." She looked up. The man walking toward her wore a police uniform. NYPD. Shield number visible. Face she recognized from the courthouse, from the waiting room outside the prosecutor's office where she'd given her statement about Sarah's murder 3 times, each time remembering new details she wished she could forget. Officer Marcus Webb, 30-something, built like he spent serious time in the gym. Troy's, friend from his days as a security guard, before he got fired for anger issues, before the restraining order Sarah had filed and then dropped, before everything went wrong. Nina's blood turned to ice. "Ms. Torres," Webb said. Smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Thought I'd find you here." She set down the book she was holding, forced her voice steady. "Officer Webb, is there news about the case?" "Oh, there's news." He stopped 3 feet away, close enough that she could smell his cologne. Too much of it. Troy's bail hearing got moved up. Judge is sympathetic. Overcrowding at Rikers. You know how it is. Nina's throat closed. "When?" "Week from Tuesday." Webb's smile widened. "Thought you'd want to know, so you can prepare." The threat was there. Unspoken but clear as glass. Nina's hands were shaking. She pressed them against her thighs. "He violated a restraining order. He killed Sarah. He's not getting bail." "Judges are unpredictable," Webb said. "And Troy's got a good lawyer. Now. Real good. Making arguments about self-defense, about Sarah's history. You know, drug use, mental instability. The kind of history that makes juries wonder if maybe things weren't as simple as they seemed. Sarah hadn't used drugs. Sarah had been clean for 6 years, but Nina knew how these things worked, how truth became flexible in courtrooms, how defense attorneys built reasonable doubt from lies that sounded plausible. "Get out," Nina said, her voice barely above a whisper. Webb leaned closer. "Troy asked me to give you a message. He says, I said get out." The voice came from behind Webb. Low, quiet, carrying weight that made the air pressure change. Elias stood 15 feet away, still holding his coffee, face completely calm. But something in his posture had shifted, something that made Webb turn around fast, hand moving instinctively toward his hip. "This is a private conversation," Webb said. "This is a public library," Elias replied. "And the lady asked you to leave." Webb's eyes narrowed. Nina watched him catalog Elias the way she had. Expensive clothes, quiet confidence, the kind of calm that suggested violence was an option he'd considered and rejected. For now. "Who the hell are you?" Webb asked. "Someone who doesn't like cops harassing librarians." The word cops came out with particular emphasis. Not quite contempt, but close. Webb's jaw tightened. He looked at Nina, back at Elias, making calculations. "This isn't over," he said finally. "Yes," Elias said. "It is." Webb held his ground for another 3 seconds, then walked toward the exit, boots loud against the floor. The door swung shut behind him with a sound like punctuation. Nina realized she was gripping the edge of the shelf hard enough to hurt. Elias walked over. Didn't touch her. Just stood there. Presence like a wall between her and the door Webb had just left through. "You know him?" Nina managed. "I know his type." "And what type is that?" Elias looked at her. Really looked, like he was deciding how much truth to tell. "The kind that sells his badge to whoever pays best," he said finally. "The kind that takes money from men like Troy Maldonado and calls it consulting work." Nina's stomach dropped. "How do you know Troy's name?" Silence stretched between them. Then Elias said, "I pay attention. And I've been coming here long enough to notice when someone's afraid. When they check the door every 30 seconds. When they burn letters in the bathroom at 2 in the morning and think nobody notices smoke on their clothes the next day." Nina's breath caught. "You've been watching me." "I've been watching over you," Elias corrected. "There's a difference." "Why?" The word came out sharp, accusatory. "Why would you do that? You don't know me. You don't know Mia. We're nothing to you." Elias's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes did. Something old and hurt and buried so deep it only showed in moments like this. "My mother died when I was 16, he said. "Man she witnessed commit murder decided she was a liability. Shot her in our kitchen while I was at school. I came home and found her." Nina's anger drained away, replaced by something worse. Recognition. "When I see a woman trying to protect a child from a man who thinks he owns them." Elias paused, looked toward the circulation desk where Mia sat coloring, unaware. "I don't walk away, not anymore." "Troy's getting out," Nina whispered. "Next week, maybe, and I can't stop. Him. I don't have custody. Sarah never made it legal. I'm nobody. I can't protect her." "Yes," Elias said. "You can." "How?" He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was different, certain, the voice of someone who'd made decisions that couldn't be unmade. "Because you're not alone anymore." Nina stared at him, at this stranger who read picture books and drank coffee with too much sugar and apparently knew exactly who Troy Maldonado was. "I don't even know your name," she said. Elias Moreau." He extended his hand. Old-fashioned gesture. Formal. Nina looked at it. At him. At the life she'd been living for 8 months. Afraid, exhausted, alone. She shook his hand. His grip was warm, steady. The hand of someone who'd held guns and signed contracts and probably done things Nina didn't want to know about. "Troy won't touch you," Elias said. "Or Mia. I give you my word." "Your word," Nina repeated. "And what exactly is that worth?" Elias smiled. Then, small, sad. "More than you'd think. Less than it should be. But in this case, He released her hand. Everything. Nina wanted to believe him. She wanted to ask what he meant, what he planned to do, how a man who came to libraries could promise protection from someone like Troy Maldonado. But Mia was walking over, carrying another book, and Elias's expression shifted back to neutral calm, and Nina realized she'd just accepted help from a man she didn't know, didn't trust, didn't understand. A man who'd been watching over her for a week without her realizing. A man whose word might mean violence. Mia held up the book. Madeline. "Will you read?" she asked Elias. He took the book. "Of course." They walked back to the philosophy section together. Mia's small hand not quite touching his sleeve, trusting in the way only children and fools trusted. Nina stood there in the history section, surrounded by books about wars and revolutions, and times when good people made dangerous choices. She touched her phone, found the text thread with the prosecutor's office, started typing. "Officer Webb came to library, threatened me about Troy's bail hearing." Her finger hovered over send, then she deleted it, because she understood now. Understood what Elias had been trying to tell her without saying it directly. The system wouldn't protect them. The law wouldn't save them. But maybe, the quiet man reading Madeline in the philosophy section could do what courts and lawyers and restraining orders couldn't. Maybe monsters were only defeated by other monsters. Nina closed her eyes, made her choice, hated herself a little for making it. Then she went back to her desk and waited for Troy's bail hearing, and told herself that accepting help wasn't the same as accepting what that help might cost. Elias came every day after that, same chair, same books. But something had shifted. The pretense was gone. He wasn't hiding anymore, and neither was Nina. She learned things about him in fragments. Small pieces offered carefully, like he was teaching her a language she'd need to speak fluently soon. He owned property in Queens, legitimate businesses, 3 restaurants, a construction company, an import-export firm that dealt in textiles. He'd never married, had no children. Lived alone in a house in Forest Hills that he described once as too big for one person, with a tone that suggested he'd bought it for someone who never came. What he didn't say was louder than what he did. Nina had grown up in Queens. She knew the neighborhood hierarchies, knew which businesses were fronts and which were real, knew that men who owned construction companies and import firms in certain zip codes weren't just businessmen. She didn't ask directly, and he didn't offer directly. The arrangement worked. 2 days before Troy's bail hearing, Mia had a nightmare. Nina woke to small hands gripping her arm, nails digging in hard enough to leave marks. Mia's breathing was fast and shallow, her whole body rigid. Baby, you're safe. You're with me." But Mia's eyes were open and unseeing, locked on something that wasn't in the room. Something from 8 months ago. Something she'd witnessed through a crack in the closet door. "Mommy," Mia whispered. "Mommy's on the floor. Mommy won't get up." Nina pulled her close, felt the small body shaking like something breaking apart from the inside. "I'm here. I've got you. You're safe. He's coming back." Mia's voice was thread thin, certain. "The bad man is coming back." Nina held her tighter, rocked her slowly, lied with every word. No, baby. He's not. I won't let him." But Mia knew. Children always knew when adults were lying about the important things. They stayed awake until dawn. Mia curled against Nina's chest. Nina staring at the ceiling, calculating distances. How fast could they pack? Where could they go that Troy wouldn't find them? How long could they run before money ran out? Before she lost her job, before Mia's trauma compounded into something that couldn't be fixed? The answer was, not long enough. At the library that afternoon, Elias took one look at Nina's face and said, "When's the hearing?" "Tomorrow, 10 a.m. He nodded slowly, set down his coffee. "And you're planning to run?" It wasn't a question. Nina's throat tightened. "I don't know what else to do." Elias was quiet for a long moment. Then, "May I show you something?" Nina glanced at Mia, who was coloring with the intense focus of someone trying to make the world smaller, more controllable. "It won't take long," Elias said. Nina hesitated, then nodded. They walked outside together. November air bit at her face. Elias led her to a black sedan parked 2 blocks away. Expensive, German. The kind of car that cost more than Nina made in 3 years. He opened the passenger door. "Please." Every instinct told her this was a mistake, that getting in cars with men you barely knew was how women disappeared. How stories ended badly, but she got in anyway. Elias drove without speaking. 10 minutes through Queen streets she recognized, then into neighborhoods she didn't. Bigger houses, quieter streets, trees that looked like someone actually watered them. He pulled up in front of a house, 2 stories, brick facade, garden that probably looked beautiful in spring, iron fence, security camera visible above the door. "This is yours?" Nina asked. "Yes." "Why are we here?" Elias turned off the engine, looked at her with those storm-gray eyes that held weather she couldn't predict. "Because running won't work. Troy has connections. Webb isn't the only cop on his payroll. He'll find you in a week, maybe 2. And when he does, you'll be alone somewhere unfamiliar. No support system, no resources, no way out." Nina's hands clenched in her lap. "So what do you suggest?" "Stay. Let me help." "Help how?" Elias was quiet for 3 breaths. Then, "Troy won't make bail. I'll make sure of it." Nina's stomach dropped. "What does that mean?" "It means I have contacts in places you don't. People who owe me favors. People who can make sure certain evidence surfaces. Certain violations come to light. Certain judges remember that bail is a privilege, not a right." "You're talking about manipulation, about corruption. I'm talking about protection." Elias's voice was steady, certain. The system failed Sarah. It let Troy hurt her for years before he killed her. It's about to fail you and Mia the same way, unless someone intervenes. Nina wanted to argue, wanted to say that wasn't how justice worked, that you couldn't just manipulate the law to suit your needs, that 2 wrongs didn't make anything right. But Sarah was dead, and Troy was about to walk free, and the law had done exactly nothing to prevent either outcome. "If he makes bail," Elias continued quietly, "he'll come for Mia. You know this. And when he does, what will you do? Call the police? File another restraining order? Hope that this time, somehow, the system protects you?" Nina closed her eyes, felt tears press hot against her eyelids. "I can't ask you to break the law for us." "You're not asking. I'm offering." "Why?" The word came out raw. "Why would you do this? We're nothing to you. You don't owe us anything." Elias looked away, toward his house, toward the garden that probably looked beautiful in spring. "My mother begged," he said finally. "Before they killed her, she begged them to think about me, about what it would do to her son to find her. They laughed and shot her anyway. And I—" His voice caught. Barely, just for a second. "I learned that begging doesn't work, that the law doesn't protect people who can't afford protection, that if you want justice, you take it with your own hands." He looked back at Nina. "I can't save my mother, but I can save you. Let me." Nina sat there in the passenger seat of a car worth more than everything she owned, looking at a house she'd never be able to afford, listening, to a man offer to commit crimes on her behalf. She thought about Mia's nightmare, about Sarah bleeding on a kitchen floor, about Troy's letters, about Officer Webb's smile. She thought about justice and law, and the difference between the two. "Okay," she whispered. Elias nodded once. "I'll handle it." "How?" "Don't ask. It's better if you don't know." He drove her back to the library. Neither of them spoke. When Nina got out, he said, "The hearing's at 10 tomorrow. By noon, Troy will be denied bail. I promise you." Nina looked at him through the open car door. This man who read picture books and made promises that sounded like threats. "And if you're wrong?" "I'm not wrong." He said it with such certainty that Nina almost believed him. Almost. That night, Mia asked if the quiet man would protect them. Nina was tucking her in. Ritual they performed even though Mia would end up in Nina's bed within an hour. "What makes you ask that, baby?" Mia's brown eyes were too knowing, too old. "He watches the door, like you do, like he's checking for bad people." Nina's chest ached. "Yeah, I think he would protect us, if we needed him to." "Do we need him to?" Nina smoothed Mia's curls back from her forehead. "Maybe. I don't know yet." Mia was quiet for a moment. Then, "I like him. He's quiet. He doesn't make me scared." "Good," Nina whispered. "That's good." She stayed until Mia's breathing evened out, then went to her own room and stared at her phone, and waited for tomorrow and told herself that accepting help from dangerous men didn't make her dangerous too. But she didn't believe it. The bail hearing was denied at 11:47 a.m. Nina sat in the courtroom gallery, hands folded so tightly her knuckles went white, and listened to the prosecutor present new evidence. Security footage from a convenience store Troy had robbed 3 years ago. Testimony from a witness who'd been too afraid to come forward until now. Documentation of parole violations from Troy's previous sentence. All of it surfaced in the last 24 hours. All of it perfectly timed. All of it impossible to refute. The judge denied bail, remanded Troy back to Rikers pending trial, set a new court date 6 months out. Troy turned in his seat, found Nina in the gallery. His eyes held a promise that made her blood freeze. Then, the bailiff led him away. Nina walked out of the courthouse on legs that barely held her weight. The November sun felt too bright. The street noise too loud. Everything surreal, like she'd stepped sideways into a different version of reality where things worked out, where justice actually happened, where... Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Text message. "He won't touch you. Go home. Rest. I'll see you tomorrow." Nina stared at the words, deleted the message. Stood there on the courthouse steps feeling something between relief and horror. Elias had kept his promise. She didn't want to know how. That afternoon at the library, he didn't come. Mia asked twice where the quiet man was. Nina said she didn't know, which was true. Sort of. He came the next day. Same chair, same Camus, same coffee that Nina brought him without being asked. Black, 2 sugars, the cup shaking slightly when she set it down. "Thank you," Elias said quietly. Nina sat in the chair across from him, the one usually occupied by elderly Mr. Chen, who came to read Chinese newspapers. Mr. Chen wasn't here today. "How did you do it?" Nina asked, her voice low enough that it wouldn't carry past the philosophy section. "Does it matter?" "Yes." Elias set down his book, looked at her with those gray eyes that held weather she was starting to understand. Storm clouds, always storm clouds. I made phone calls. People owed me favors. I collected. The evidence was real. Troy did commit those crimes. I just made sure they surfaced at the right time. You manipulated the legal system. I used the legal system the way it's supposed to work. Bad people go to jail. Good people stay safe. Sometimes, the order of operations needs adjustment. Nina's jaw tightened. You're talking about it like it's simple. Like justice is just a matter of knowing the right people. Isn't it? Elias's voice was gentle, not mocking. You think Troy would have stayed in jail without intervention? You think the system would have protected Mia on its own? Nina wanted to argue, wanted to defend the law, the process, the idea that things worked without corruption, without men like Elias pulling strings in the dark. But she couldn't. Because Sarah was dead, and Troy had almost walked free, and the only reason he didn't was sitting across from her drinking coffee in a public library. I don't know how to thank you, she said finally. You don't have to. Yes, I do. Her voice cracked. You saved us. You saved Mia. And I don't even know who you really are. Elias was quiet for a long moment. Then he leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and said something Nina suspected he hadn't said to many people. When my mother died, I was 16. Alone. The police did nothing. Said it was gang violence, unsolvable, too dangerous to pursue. I learned then that if you want justice, you have to take it yourself. So I did. You killed them. Not a question. Yes. The word hung between them like smoke. I killed the men who murdered my mother, and then I realized I was good at it. Killing, controlling, building power from violence. So I kept going, built an organization, made money, made enemies, made a life out of the thing that destroyed me. He looked at his hands. Expensive watch, clean nails, hands that had held guns and signed death warrants and apparently read children's books with equal ease. For 34 years, I've been that man. Elias Moreau. Boss. Feared. Respected. Alone. He looked up at Nina. And then a little girl brought me a picture book and asked if I could read. And I realized I'd forgotten what it felt like to be anything other than dangerous. Nina's throat was tight. You're trying to tell me you're using us. That we're your redemption project. No. Elias shook his head. I'm telling you that for the first time in decades, I remembered why I became this in the first place. To protect people who can't protect themselves. To make sure what happened to my mother doesn't happen to anyone else. I'd forgotten that. Until Mia. Nina looked toward the circulation desk. Mia was coloring again. Safe. Unaware. Just a child doing child things. There's a war happening, Elias said quietly. In my organization. Young men who think I'm too old, too soft, too stuck in the past. They're planning to remove me. Violently. Nina's stomach dropped. When? Soon. I've been using the library as neutral ground. Somewhere they won't follow. Somewhere I can think without looking over my shoulder every second. So you're in danger, and you're here, with us, making us targets. No one knows I come here. No one knows about you or Mia. I've been careful. Careful. Nina's voice went sharp. You just manipulated a court case. You think no one noticed? Troy has friends. Officer Webb works for him. How long before they connect you to what happened? Elias's expression didn't change. Webb works for whoever pays him. As of yesterday, I pay better. He won't be a problem. Nina stood up. This is insane. You're telling me you're a crime boss in the middle of a power struggle, and you're spending your afternoons reading children's books in a public, library? Yes. Why? Elias stood too. Slowly. They were close now. Close enough that Nina could see the scar on his left cheekbone. Thin. White. Old. Because Mia reminds me of who I was before I became this, he said. And you remind me of my mother, trying to protect someone with nothing but will and hope. And I can't save my mother. But maybe... His voice caught again. Barely. Maybe I can save you. Nina felt tears press hot behind her eyes. I don't want to be saved. I want to save Mia, Myself. I want to be enough. You are enough. But being enough doesn't mean doing it alone. They stood there in the philosophy section, surrounded by books about existentialism and meaning and the nature of choice, and Nina understood something she hadn't before. Elias Moreau was dangerous, but he was also broken, and broken things recognized each other. What happens when your war ends? Nina asked. When you win or lose, what happens to us? Nothing. You go back to your life. Mia grows up. You forget I was ever here. I don't think that's possible. It has to be. Elias's voice was firm, final. You deserve a normal life. Mia deserves to grow up without looking over her shoulder. I won't let my world touch yours more than it already has. Nina wanted to argue, wanted to say that it was too late, that they were already touched, that you couldn't just undo knowing someone, trusting someone, needing someone. But Mia was walking over, holding another book, and Elias's expression shifted back to neutral calm, and Nina realized this was how it would be. Compartmentalized, separated. Him in his violent world, her in her safe one, and only these brief moments in between where they could pretend the gap between them wasn't an ocean. Will you read? Mia asked, holding up the giving tree. Elias took the book. Of course. They sat together. Mia leaning slightly toward him, not touching, but there, trusting. Nina watched them and wondered what happened when the dangerous man left and the little girl asked where he'd gone. Wondered if safety was worth the cost of loss. Wondered if she'd already made a choice she couldn't unmake. 3 weeks passed. Troy remained in Rikers. The trial date held firm. Officer Webb stopped coming to the library. Nina saw him once across the street, watching, but he didn't approach. Just stood there for 5 minutes, then left. Elias came every afternoon at 2. Read to Mia, drank his coffee. Sometimes talked to Nina in quiet tones about nothing important. Books he'd read, places he'd traveled when he was younger, before the organization consumed his life. He never mentioned the war inside his world. But Nina saw it in the way he checked his phone, in the new scar on his knuckles that hadn't been there last week, in the exhaustion that lived behind his eyes on days when he looked like he hadn't slept. Mia was sleeping better, still in Nina's bed, but through the night now. The nightmares came less frequently. She smiled more, laughed sometimes when Elias read the funny parts with perfect dramatic timing. Nina told herself this was temporary, that eventually Elias would stop coming, that she'd thank him one last time, and he'd disappear back into whatever dark world he lived in, and she and Mia would be fine. She told herself this every night. She didn't believe it anymore. The break came on a Tuesday. Nina was restocking the children's section when she heard voices. Raised, angry, coming from the philosophy area. She moved fast through the stacks. Heard Elias's voice first, low, controlled, but with an edge she hadn't heard before. I said we're not discussing this here. You don't get to decide that anymore. Different voice. Younger, sharper. You've been hiding for weeks, avoiding meetings, avoiding decisions. The family's making moves without you, old man. Nina came around the corner. 2 men stood facing Elias. Both younger, 30s maybe. Both wearing expensive clothes that didn't quite hide the hardness underneath. Both carrying themselves like violence was a language they spoke fluently. Mia was behind the circulation desk, frozen, crayon clutched in one hand. Elias saw Nina. His expression shifted, something like warning, like apology. Gentlemen, he said quietly. Leave. Now. The taller one laughed. Or what? You gonna make a scene in a public library? That's not your style, Elias. You're too careful, too controlled. That's your problem. That's why we're taking... He stopped, mid-sentence, because Elias had moved, not attacked. Just shifted position. Small movement. Barely noticeable. But suddenly he was between the two men and the circulation desk. Between them and Mia. The air pressure changed. I said leave. The shorter man's hand moved toward his jacket. Nina's breath stopped in her throat. She thought about Mia. About screaming. About running. About... Don't. Elias's voice was different now. Colder. The voice of someone who'd killed and would kill again without hesitation. You pull that weapon in front of the child and I will end you. Not later. Not strategically. Right now. Right here. Consequences be damned. The man's hand froze. Silence stretched like wire pulled too tight. Then the taller one said, "This isn't over." "Yes," Elias said. "It is. You came to neutral ground, threatened civilians, broke every code we have. When the others hear about this, you won't have to worry about me. You'll have to worry about them." The two men exchanged glances, calculations happening behind their eyes. Then they left. The door swung shut behind them. Elias didn't move for 10 seconds, just stood there, body still positioned between the door and Mia. Then slowly, carefully, he turned. "Nina, get out." Her voice shook. "Get out right now." "Let me explain. You brought them here, to us. You said we were safe. You said no one knew. You lied." "I didn't lie. They followed me. I didn't know until... I don't care." Nina moved to the desk, gathered Mia into her arms. The small body was rigid, trembling. "You need to leave. And don't come back." Elias looked at Mia. Something broke in his expression. Something Nina had never seen before. "Mia," he said quietly. "I'm sorry. I never meant for you to see that. I never meant..." "Go." Nina's voice cracked. "Please, just go." He stood there for 3 more seconds, then nodded once, and left. Nina held Mia and tried to stop shaking. That night, Mia didn't speak. Not during dinner. Not during bath time. Not when Nina tucked her into bed and tried to explain that everything was okay, that the men were gone, that they were safe. Mia just stared at the ceiling with eyes too old for 5 years. At midnight, she finally said, "The quiet man is like Daddy." Nina's blood went cold. "What?" "He hurts people, like Daddy hurt Mommy. He just hides it better." "No, baby, no. Elias isn't..." But Nina couldn't finish the sentence, because she didn't know what Elias was, didn't know what he'd done, what he was capable of. "I thought he was safe," Mia whispered. "But nobody's safe. Everybody hurt somebody." Nina pulled her close, felt the small body rigid against her chest. "That's not true. Some people are good. Some people protect instead of hurt." "How do you know which ones?" Nina didn't have an answer. They lay there in the dark until Mia finally fell asleep, and Nina stared at the ceiling and wondered if she'd made a terrible mistake. If accepting help from Elias Moreau had put them in more danger than Troy ever could have. If protection from one monster just meant belonging to another. Elias didn't come to the library the next day, or the day after. Mia asked once where he was. Nina said she didn't know. Mia nodded and went back to coloring, but something in her expression had changed. Closed off. The trust she'd been building crumbled back into wariness. On the 3rd day, Nina found an envelope in her mailbox at home. No return address, just her name in neat handwriting. Inside, a key and a note. "The house in Forest Hills. It's yours if you need it. Deed is in your name as of yesterday. Security system installed. Panic room in the basement. I won't come there. I won't contact you. But if Troy makes bail somehow, if Webb comes back, if you need somewhere safe, it's there. Always. I'm sorry I brought my world to yours. I'm sorry Mia saw what she saw. I'm I'm sorry I couldn't be what you needed. Safe without strings. Protection without cost. The war ends soon. One way or another. When it does, I'll make sure no one from my organization ever knows you exist. You'll be ghosts. Safe ghosts. Tell Mia I'm sorry I scared her. Tell her the quiet man was real. Just not real enough. And Nina read the note 3 times, looked at the key. Heavy, brass, the weight of a house she hadn't asked for, hadn't earned, couldn't possibly accept. She put it in her desk drawer, told herself she'd mail it back. Didn't. 4 days after Elias left, Officer Webb came back. Nina was locking up the library at closing. Mia beside her, holding her hand with that grip that said, "Don't let go. Don't ever let go." Webb stepped out from between parked cars. "Ms. Torres, we need to talk." Nina's heart slammed against her ribs. She pulled Mia closer, looked for witnesses. The street was empty, winter evening, dark by 5 p.m., nobody around. "I have nothing to say to you. Troy wants to send a message. He knows someone helped you, someone with connections. He wants to know who?" "I don't know what you're talking about." Webb smiled, took a step closer. "Your friend, the one who's been coming to the library, reading to the kid. He got involved in something he shouldn't have, made enemies, and now those enemies want to use you to get to him." Nina's mouth went dry. "I don't have a friend. I don't know anyone." "Wrong answer." Webb's hand moved to his belt. Not his gun, something else. Phone. He held it up, showed her a photo. Elias, outside the library, clear as day. "Elias Moreau," Webb said. "Boss of the Moreau family. Dangerous man. And apparently he's got a soft spot for librarians and orphans. Troy's very interested in that information. So are some other people." Nina couldn't breathe. "Here's what's going to happen," Webb continued. "You're going to tell me where Moreau is, what he's planning, who he's meeting with, and in exchange I'll make sure Troy's friends leave you alone. I don't know where he is. He just read books. That's all." Webb's expression hardened. "You've got 24 hours to remember something useful. After that..." He looked down at Mia. "Well, let's just say Troy's not the only one who thinks he owns that kid." He walked away. Nina stood there on the sidewalk, holding Mia, shaking so hard she thought she might fall apart. Then she pulled out her phone, stared at it, realized she didn't have Elias's number, didn't know how to reach him, didn't know if he'd even come if she called. But she had the key, and suddenly, running to the house in Forest Hills didn't seem like accepting help from a monster. It seemed like survival. Nina packed in 20 minutes, clothes thrown into garbage bags because she didn't have time to find suitcases. Mia's stuffed rabbit, birth certificates hidden in a book. Sarah's photograph, the one from before Troy, when Sarah still smiled like she believed the world was good. Mia stood in the doorway watching. Silent. That terrible silence that meant she understood they were running again. "Are we going to the quiet man's house?" she asked finally. Nina's hands froze over the bag. "How did you..." "I heard you on the phone, talking to the lady about the address." Nina hadn't been on the phone, but she had been muttering the address to herself, memorizing it. Children heard everything, especially children who'd learned that listening could save your life. "Yes," Nina said. "We're going there, just for a little while." "Is he there?" "No, he's away. But he gave us a safe place, and we need safe right now." Mia nodded, picked up her rabbit. "Okay." They left the apartment at 7 p.m. Nina had called in sick to work, called her supervisor with some excuse about food poisoning. She'd never missed a day in 3 years. they'd believe her. The taxi ride to Forest Hills felt like it took hours. Nina watched every car behind them, every face on the sidewalk, looking for Webb, for Troy's friends, for the two men who'd come to the library, looking for ghosts. The house was exactly as she remembered. Brick facade, iron fence, security camera that tracked their approach. Nina used the key. The door opened smoothly. Silent. Inside smelled like leather and wood polish. And something else. Expensive cologne. Faint. Like Elias had been here recently, but not today. The lights came on automatically. Motion sensors. Everything gleamed. Hardwood floors. Crown molding. Furniture that looked like it cost more than Nina's car. "It's pretty," Mia whispered. Nina found the security panel by the door. A note taped next to it in the same neat handwriting. Code is 0416. My mother's birthday. Panic room is in the basement. Behind the wine rack, red button on the left. Press and hold for 3 seconds. Stay inside until I come, or until police arrive. I've programmed the system to alert me and 911 simultaneously if triggered. Nina memorized the code, set the alarm, checked every window lock, found the panic room, exactly as described. Steel door disguised as wine storage, stocked with water, food, first aid kit, phone line that went directly to 911. Elias had thought of everything. Nina wanted to hate him for it, for being this prepared, for knowing they might need this. Instead, she just felt tired. They ate dinner at the huge kitchen table. Canned soup Nina found in the pantry. Crackers. Mia picked at her food. "Are we safe here?" she asked. "Yes, I think so. You said we were safe before. At the apartment. At the library." Nina's throat tightened. "I know. I'm sorry. I thought we were. Why do bad people keep finding us?" "I don't know, baby." Mia pushed soup around in her bowl. "Maybe we're not supposed to be safe. Maybe that's not how our family works." The words hit Nina like a physical blow. 5 years old and already resigned to danger. Already accepting that safety was something other people got. "No," Nina said firmly. "No, Mia. You deserve to be safe. We both do. And we will be. I promise." "You can't promise that. Nobody can." And Nina realized Mia was right. She couldn't promise safety. Couldn't promise that running would work. Couldn't promise anything except that she'd try. That she'd keep trying until she couldn't anymore. They slept in one of the guest bedrooms. Nina couldn't bring herself to use what was clearly Elias's room. That felt like a violation somehow. A crossing of lines that she wasn't ready to cross. Mia fell asleep quickly, exhaustion winning over fear. Nina lay awake and stared at her phone and wondered if she should call the police. Tell them about Webb's threat, about the photo, about everything. But what would she say? That a corrupt cop was working for her friend's murderer? That she was hiding in a crime boss's house? That she'd accepted help from a man who'd manipulated the legal system? They'd take Mia away. Put her in foster care while they investigated. And Troy would find her there. Nina knew it. Knew how these things worked. No, police weren't the answer. But neither was hiding. At midnight, the doorbell rang. Nina bolted upright, heart slamming, grabbed her phone, looked at the security camera feed that showed on the monitor by the bed. Elias had thought of that too. A man stood on the doorstep. Not Webb, not the two men from the library. Elias. He looked exhausted, suit rumpled, dark circles under his eyes, blood on his collar that might have been his, or might have been someone else's. He rang the bell again. Nina got up, left Mia sleeping, went downstairs, stood on the other side of the door with her hand on the deadbolt. "Nina." His voice came through the heavy wood. Quiet, rough. I know you're there. I got the alert when you armed the system. Please. I need to know you're okay. We're fine. Webb came to the library. I know. I have people watching. He's been handled. Nina's stomach dropped. What does that mean? It means he won't bother you again. Ever. Did you... She couldn't finish the question. No, I didn't kill him. But I made it very clear what would happen if he came near you. And I gave him enough money to disappear somewhere warm. He took it. Nina pressed her forehead against the door. The two men, the ones who came to the library. Who are they? No one you need to worry about anymore. Elias. Silence. Then, they're dead. I'm sorry. There was no other way. They knew about you and Mia. They were going to use you to get to me. I couldn't allow that. Nina's hand tightened on the deadbolt. So you killed them? Yes. The word hung in the air between them. Simple, final, honest. The war, Nina said. The one inside your organization. Is it over? Almost. One more move, one more meeting, and then it's done. And then what? You disappear? We pretend we never knew each other? Elias was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was different. Vulnerable in a way she'd never heard. I don't know how to be anything except what I am. I've tried. For 34 years I've tried to be something other than the man who killed at 17 and never stopped. But this is who I am. Violence and control and calculated decisions. And you... His voice cracked. You and Mia deserve better than that. Deserve someone who can keep you safe without blood on his hands. Someone who isn't afraid that his world will consume yours. Nina closed her eyes. Felt tears press hot behind her eyelids. What if I don't want someone else? She whispered. Silence. Then, Nina, don't. Don't what? Don't tell the truth. You've been honest with me. Let me be honest with you. She opened the door. Elias stood there in the porch light. Blood definitely on his collar. Exhaustion carved into his face. Looking older than 50. Looking like a man who'd fought wars and won at costs he could never repay. Looking human. I'm afraid, Nina said. I'm afraid of what you are, of what you do, of what it means that Mia trusts you. But I'm more afraid of what happens if you leave, if Webb comes back, if Troy gets out, if the next threat comes and we're alone again. You won't be alone. I've made arrangements. Money in an account under your name. Contacts who will help if you need it. People who owe me enough that they'll protect you even after I'm gone. Stop talking like you're dying. In my world, everyone's dying. It's just a matter of when. Nina stepped forward, close enough to see the exhaustion in his eyes, close enough to smell blood and cologne and coffee. Mia asked if you were like her. Father, if you hurt people like he hurt her mother. Pain flashed across Elias's face. What did you tell her? I told her I didn't know. Because I don't. I know you kill. I know you manipulate. I know you control things from the shadows. But I also know you read to a traumatized child every day for weeks. I know you gave us your house. I know you're standing here looking like you haven't slept in days because you've been trying to keep us safe. She reached up, touched his face. He flinched, like the gentleness hurt more than violence ever could. So tell me, Nina said, are you like Troy? Or are you something else? Elias's hand came up, covered hers, warm, steady. The hand of someone who'd held guns and signed death warrants and read Where the Wild Things Are with perfect dramatic timing. I don't know, he said finally. I used to think I was different. That killing bad people made me good. But lately I wonder if violence is just violence, regardless of reason. If the only difference between me and Troy is that I convinced myself my brutality has purpose. Do you want to hurt us? No, never. Do you want to control us? Own us? No. Then you're not Troy. Nina's voice was firm, certain. Troy hurt because he enjoyed it. You hurt because you think it's the only way to protect. That's different. Is it different enough? Nina didn't know how to answer that. Didn't know if there was an answer. So instead she said, "Come inside. You look like you're about to fall over." Elias shook his head. "I can't. If someone followed me." "Did anyone follow you?" "No. I was careful." "Then come inside." He hesitated, then stepped over the threshold. Nina closed the door, set the alarm, led him to the kitchen. They sat at the table. Nina made coffee. Black. 2 sugars. Set it in front of him. Elias wrapped both hands around the cup like he was trying to absorb its warmth. "One more day," he said quietly. "One more meeting. And then the young ones who wanted me, gone, will be neutralized. Not dead. Just convinced that challenging me would cost more than it's worth. And then I step back. Let someone else run things. Someone younger who isn't tired. You're 50, not 80. I'm 50 and I've lived 100 years. I'm done, Nina. I'm just so tired of being afraid that everyone I care about will be used against me." "Is that what we are? People you care about?" Elias looked up, met her eyes. "Yes." The word hung between them. Simple. Devastating. True. "Mia called you the quiet man," Nina said. "She said you make silence like she does, respectful silence. She's remarkable. She's been through hell and she's still kind, still hopeful. That's rare. She asked about you, after you left. Asked where you'd gone." Elias's expression crumpled, just for a second. Then he put it back together. "I'm sorry I scared her. I'm sorry she saw those men. I'm sorry for all of it." "I know. But sorry doesn't change what happened. Doesn't change what she saw. No, it doesn't." They sat in silence, drinking coffee. 2 broken people in a kitchen too big for either of them. Finally, Nina said, "When this is over, when your war ends, will you come back to the library?" Elias was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "Would you want me to?" "Yes." "Why?" Nina thought about the last 3 weeks, about Mia sleeping through the night, about feeling, for the first time since Sarah died, like maybe they wouldn't have to run forever. Like maybe someone was watching their backs. "Because Mia needs you," she said finally, "and because I think maybe I do too." Elias's hands tightened on the coffee cup. "You don't know what you're saying. My world is dark, Nina. Dangerous. Full of people who'd hurt you just to hurt me. I know. But my world is dangerous too. Troy's still out there. His friends, his connections. Running didn't work. Hiding doesn't work. Maybe..." She took a breath. "Maybe the only way to survive is to stop being alone." Elias looked at her with those storm-gray eyes. And for the first time, Nina saw something other than weather. She saw hope. The meeting happened on a Thursday. Elias left before dawn. Nina heard the door close quietly, heard his car pull away. Lay there in the guest bedroom with Mia curled against her side and tried not to think about what neutralizing young rivals actually meant. Tried not to imagine him not coming back. He'd left another note on the kitchen counter. She found it when she got up to make breakfast. "If I'm not back by 6 p.m., call this number." A phone number written below in that neat handwriting. "Ask for Marcus. Tell him you're the librarian. He'll handle everything. The house is yours regardless. The money is yours. You'll be protected. I made sure. Nina folded the note, put it in her pocket, made pancakes with hands that shook slightly. Mia ate in silence, then asked, "Is the quiet man coming back?" "I don't know." "Do you want him to?" Nina looked at her daughter, not legally, not yet, but hers in every way that mattered. 5 years old with eyes too old and questions too hard. "Yes," Nina said, "I do." Mia nodded slowly. "Me too. Even though he's scary sometimes, he's still nice." "Yeah, he is." They spent the day in the house. Nina couldn't bring herself to leave, couldn't risk going anywhere that Elias's enemies might find them. So they read books, drew pictures. Mia taught her stuffed rabbit how to be brave. At 4 p.m., Nina's phone buzzed. Unknown number. Text. "It's done. I'm alive. Coming to you. Be there by 7. And Nina sat down hard on the couch, read the message 3 times, felt something in her chest unclench. He was alive. He was coming. Elias arrived at 7:14 p.m. Nina watched him on the security camera. He looked exhausted but uninjured. No blood this time. Just tiredness that went bone deep. She opened the door before he could ring the bell. They looked at each other across the threshold. Neither spoke for 3 long seconds. Then Elias said, "It's over. The young ones agreed to terms. I step back from daily operations. Keep advisory role. They get control without bloodshed. Everyone wins. You gave up your empire. I gave up something I was tired of carrying." He paused. "For something I didn't know I wanted until a little girl asked me to read a picture book." Nina stepped back. "Come in." He did. Mia appeared in the hallway, wearing pajamas Nina had found in one of the guest room drawers, too big, probably meant for grandchildren Elias never had. She stood there holding her rabbit, watching. Elias knelt down, slowly, getting to her level, the way he had that first day in the library. "Hi, Mia." "Hi. I'm sorry I scared you. When those men came, that wasn't okay. You should never have seen that." Mia studied his face with that careful attention children used when deciding if adults were telling the truth. "Are you still dangerous?" she asked. "Yes. I'll always be a little dangerous. That's part of who I am. But I'll never be dangerous to you, or to Nina. I promise. Promises can break. You're right. They can. So instead of a promise, how about this? I'll prove it. Every day. By being careful. By being respectful. By making sure you always feel safe when I'm around." Mia thought about this. Then, "Okay." She walked forward, held out the rabbit. "This is Mr. Floppy. He's been scared since Mommy died, but he's getting braver." Elias took the rabbit with both hands, held it like it was made of glass. "Mr. Floppy is very brave, just like his friend." Mia smiled, small, but real. Then she said, "Can you read to me? I want to hear the story about the tree that gives everything away." The giving tree. Nina had packed it with their things. "Of course," Elias said. They sat together in the living room. Mia curled into the couch cushions, Elias next to her, not touching, respecting space, but present. Nina watched from the doorway as he read the sad, beautiful story about love and sacrifice and what it meant to give everything for someone else. When he finished, Mia was asleep, breathing even, peaceful. Elias looked up at Nina. "She's exhausted." "We both are." Nina came over, carefully lifted Mia, carried her upstairs to the guest bedroom, tucked her in, kissed her forehead, whispered promises she wasn't sure she could keep, but would die trying. When she came back downstairs, Elias was standing by the window, looking out at the dark street, still in his coat, like he wasn't sure if he was allowed to stay. "Don't go," Nina said. He turned. "Nina, I know what you're going to say. That I deserve better. That your world is too dangerous. That Mia needs stability, not a man who kills people for a living. She walked closer. But here's what I know. For 8 months I've been running, scared, alone, trying to protect her by myself. And I was failing. Troy almost made bail. Webb almost got to us. We were one bad day away from losing everything. You wouldn't have been alone forever. You would have found help. Legal help. The right kind. The legal kind failed Sarah. It let Troy terrorize her for years. It let him kill her. It almost let him get Mia. Nina's voice was steady now. Certain. You did more in 24 hours than the system did in 8 months. Not because you're better than the law, but because you were willing to break it, when breaking it meant keeping us safe. Elias's jaw tightened. That doesn't make it right? Maybe not. But it makes it real. It makes it effective. And right now, that's what we need. What are you saying? Nina took a breath. I'm saying I don't want you to disappear. I'm saying Mia needs you. I need you. Not as some temporary protector who gives us a house and then vanishes. As... She searched for the right word. As family. Elias closed his eyes. I don't know how to be family. I haven't had one since I was 16. Neither has Mia. Her mother's dead. Her father's a murderer. Her godmother is a librarian who has no idea what she's doing. Nina's voice softened. Maybe we can figure it out together. The 3 of us. However that looks. Elias opened his eyes, looked at her with something that might have been hope or might have been fear. Probably both. I'm 50 years old, he said quietly. I've killed people. I've built an empire on violence. I can't undo that. Can't pretend it didn't happen. I'm not asking you to pretend. I'm asking you to choose. Keep being that man, or become someone different. Someone who reads bedtime stories and drinks too sweet coffee and remembers that protecting people doesn't always mean destroying their enemies. And if I can't? If the violence is too much a part of me to ever fully leave? Nina stepped closer, close enough to see the exhaustion in his face, the fear, the desperate hope. Then we'll figure that out too. But we do it together, not alone anymore. Elias reached up, touched her face the way she'd touched his days ago, gentle, like he was afraid she'd disappear if he pressed too hard. I'm afraid, he whispered. Afraid I'll fail you. Fail her. Afraid my past will catch up and hurt you both. I'm afraid too, but I'm more afraid of what happens if I send you away. If we go back to being alone. They stood there in the living room of a house too big for any of them. 2 broken people trying to figure out how to be whole. Then Elias kissed her. Not passionate, not desperate. Just gentle, careful. The kiss of someone who'd forgotten how to be soft but was remembering. Nina kissed him back, tasted coffee and exhaustion, and something that might have been hope. When they pulled apart, Elias said, I don't know how to do this, be this, whatever this is. Neither do I, but we can learn. Together, together. 3 months later, Nina stood in the library restocking the philosophy section. Elias sat in his usual chair, reading Camus. Actually reading this time. No pretense. Mia was at a table nearby, drawing. She'd started therapy 6 weeks ago. A good therapist who specialized in childhood trauma. Paid for by Elias, arranged through contacts that didn't ask questions. The nightmares were less frequent now. Mia slept in her own bed, in the room at Elias's house that had become hers. The one he'd painted yellow because she said it was a happy color. They'd moved in slowly, carefully. Nina kept the apartment in Astoria for another month just in case. But Mia kept asking to go back to the big house with the garden, kept asking when Mr. Elias would read to her again. Eventually, Nina stopped fighting it. Troy's trial was set for next month. The prosecutor felt confident. Overwhelming evidence. Multiple witnesses. Elias had made sure of that. Quietly, carefully, legally this time. Webb was gone. Last anyone heard, he was in Florida, working security for a hotel chain, living quiet. The two young men who'd challenged Elias never came back to Queens. Rumor said they'd taken positions in Philadelphia. Everyone was satisfied with the arrangement, and Elias came to the library every day at 2 p.m., read to Mia, talked to Nina about books and life and the strange shape their family was taking. Some days were hard. Days when Elias's phone rang and his expression shifted into someone Nina didn't fully know. Someone cold and calculating. Days when she remembered what he was capable of, what he'd done. But most days were good, quiet, normal in ways Nina hadn't expected. Mia looked up from her drawing. "Mr. Elias, can you help me with the tree? I can't get the branches right." He set down his book, went over, knelt beside her chair. "Show me what you're trying to do." Nina watched them together, the crime boss and the traumatized 5-year-old, making art, making family, making something neither of them had known they needed. Her phone buzzed. Text from the prosecutor. Trial date confirmed. 6 weeks. "You ready?" Nina typed back. "Yes, we're ready." And, for the first time in 8 months, she believed it. That night, after Mia was asleep, Nina and Elias sat in the kitchen, drinking wine, talking about nothing important. "She called me something today," Elias said quietly. "At breakfast, I was making pancakes and she said, 'Thank you, Grandpa.'" Nina's heart stopped. "What did you say?" "I didn't correct her. Just said, 'You're welcome, sweetheart.'" He looked at Nina. "Was that okay? Should I have—" "It was perfect. I'm not her grandfather." "No, but you're here. You're present. You're choosing her every day. That's more than biology. That's love." Elias's eyes were bright. "I never thought I'd have this. Family. People who mattered more than survival. People worth protecting for reasons beyond strategy. You have it now. Because of you. Because you were brave enough to let me in." Nina shook her head. "Because you were brave enough to read to a scared little girl. Everything else followed from that." They sat in comfortable silence, the house warm around them, safe. "I love you," Elias said suddenly. "I don't know when it happened. Maybe that first day when Mia brought me a picture book. Maybe when you opened the door even though you were terrified. Maybe every day since. But I love you, both of you, and I need you to know that." Nina felt tears press hot behind her eyes. "I love you too, even though you're dangerous, even though your past is dark, even though I don't understand half of what you do. I love you anyway." "That's enough? That's everything." Elias reached across the table, took her hand, held it the way he'd held Mr. Floppy, like it was precious, breakable, worth protecting. Outside, Queens breathed its endless rhythm, sirens and traffic and life happening everywhere. But inside this house there was only quiet. The good kind. Respectful silence. The kind that meant safety. The kind that meant home. Sometimes the people who save us aren't the ones we expected. Sometimes they're the ones the world told us to fear. Sometimes redemption doesn't look like becoming perfect. It looks like choosing to be better. One day, one story, one small hand reaching for yours in the dark.